Due to the recent terror attacks, how would you ensure security is felt within the community?
And what do you think is the best way to tackle radicalisation in schools?
Some thoughts I have on that. One is making sure you pick up people who are at risk of radicalisation. That's some of what I think the prevent work is doing, spotting the signs of someone who's vulnerable and stepping in and showing them there's a different way, that there are other ways of making a difference, that there are other things that you can do with your life and that there's hope and opportunity there. I think on the other hand, being really tough on those who are hate preachers, really tough on people who are attempting to radicalise vulnerable young people. I think having positive role models across communities is really, really important. And I think fundamentally building a more coherent, integrated, cohesive society, that though we have differences in diversity, that we are all one society with shared values.
I sit on the Prevent panel at Brunel University, and I'm against Prevent. I don't think it's a positive way of handling a very complex problem. I think it hits it too late. I think the horse has already bolted if you're dealing with that level of radicalisation. And I think actually one of the things that's really needed is a real facing up to Islamophobia and racism in our country, and the opportunity to mobilise and engage with young people in particular at a much earlier stage when they're younger, working with Muslim communities, working with other communities where there may be a risk of radicalisation, working with people with mental health problems, trying to enable people to find, as you were just saying, more constructive ways of discussing their passions.
If you look at all the other countries in the Middle East where terrorism has taken root, those who are dying at the hands of these terrorists are largely Muslims. Significant numbers of Christian communities, significant numbers of other non-Muslim minority communities are suffering. But on the whole, it's Muslims who suffer more so. But I can't deny the fact that the 7/7 bomber, Sadiq, left a video in which he said he murdered Londoners, our fellow British citizens, because our troops were involved in the killing, in his words, his brothers and sisters in Muslim countries. I cannot ignore the fact that after the brutal murder of drummer Lee Rigby in Woolwich, that his murderers said to camera, "Leave our brothers and sisters alone and we will leave you alone." It doesn't justify their murder. It doesn't justify their terrorism. Nothing can. But we cannot be blind to the arguments that they are presenting. Radical, it's good to be radical. I hope you're all radical. Otherwise, we should shut down all universities, because radical means bringing new knowledge into being, into creation. It's the violent element to all this that we should all be opposed to. And I was deeply saddened when government dropped the use of violent extremism and remained with extremism to such a degree that now I, myself, am considered in the bracket of extremists by our own government, because of view A, B, and C that I hold about X, Y, and Z.
And I do think it's interesting that one example I can give you is after the Lee Rigby thing, there was the Bravenese Community Centre in Muswell Hill was burnt down. I don't know if you remember. And Barnet Council still haven't rebuilt it. So my synagogue, we have a fantastic, very dynamic and radical, I would say, rabbi, Miriam, her name is. And for the last few years, the synagogue have hosted Ramadan prayers, because that community has nowhere to go. And there's now a very close relationship. Thank you. There's now a really close relationship. And it's interesting, I think, how people need to hear that hope. She was quite excited. There was a very small clip that was made and was put on YouTube about her and about showing the prayers and showing them being welcomed into the synagogue. And it got, by the end of the weekend, it had 1 million hits on YouTube. And I just think, because people want, we want to talk to each other. There's so much more that unites us and divides us. And it's really, we need to do everything about building bridges. And if you haven't been to the Jewish Museum, come. If you haven't been to a mosque, go, talk to communities. And that's the way we're really going to challenge.
You said about prevent isn't enough because it's too late. And then you said about you should focus on people with mental health issues. But if you genuinely think that, then why does the NHS have so little funding? And why does mental health have about 0.4% of NHS's whole funding when it's such a massive issue in young people?
In this world, the only language that people understand is the language of violence. So, therefore, it's the only way you can communicate and get your opinion across, unfortunately. Because if you talk calmly, no one's going to listen to you. So, people have to take action. I think if you don't fit the British values that we try so hard to promote, you're not going to be listened to. That's a fact.
I think the problem is people are focusing too much on Islamic societies, on how the mosque can prevent terrorism. But why am I being seen as, why are people telling me to stop ISIS when I have no relation to them? Why are the government doing more to make people stop feeling alienated and make them feel more a part of a community?
We live in the West and we cherish democracy. We say it's the best thing that's ever happened. But don't you think that through the fog of war for resources, there was an error of judgment by going to the Middle East to impose democracy whilst not understanding that the regimes in the Middle East are purely based on tradition, on religion, and not on morals that we base it on in the West?